feel very strongly about the style of ribs. So you've got your South Carolina, you've got your Memphis style, your Kentucky style. There's all different styles. So that being said, we'll talk about the different cuts. So there's baby back ribs, which are very popular. The baby back ribs come from the top of the rib cage between the spine and the spare ribs, below the loin muscle. The rack is shorter in one end. And due to the natural tapering of the pig's rib cage, the rack ribs contain a minimum of 8 ribs, but can include up to 13 ribs. The baby back ribs are typically a little bit smaller. So today I'm going to use St. Louis style ribs. The reason why is because I like the size of them. I think they're meaty. But there's also spare ribs. Spare ribs in St. Louis style are very similar. The spare ribs are taken from the belly side of the rib cage in the section of the back ribs above the breastbone. They are flatter and contain more bone than meat, but more fat, which makes the ribs more tender than back ribs. The shape is almost rectangular. These are the ribs we're using today. So you got rib tips, which are like the tips of the ribs, and then there's riblets, which butchers kind of create a little riblet by cutting the rack in half the long way. All in all, they're all very delicious, and they are American cuisine through and through. Barbecue is definitely an American cuisine, along with the hamburgers and the hot dogs, barbecue ribs and barbecue chicken. You know, and we'll talk about the different sides that go along with it. So everybody talks about fall off the bone ribs, tender ribs. And so I'm going to walk you through that a little bit. There's a technique. There really is a technique involved in this cooking style. So first what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of show you the ribs. So right here I've got a St. Louis style rack of pork ribs. So they're very lean, and they've got a nice amount of fat in there. And there's probably about 15 bones going through here. And what I'm going to do is a little preparation that might not be shared on your online recipes. I'm going to flip it over. And on the other side, and I don't know if you can see this very well, but there's this little membrane. Peel that off. The reason why I'm peeling it off is because it just makes for a better experience. You can leave it on. It doesn't have to come off. You might get a little bit more snap, almost like a natural casing on a hot dog when this stays on. But I'm going to pull it off. Just get that seasoning on the inside. I use a towel. You can kind of see. Gotta get your fingers up in there. Some come off more easier than others, but you want to get a good start. Kind of see that silver skin coming off. And once you get a good start, almost like a piece of tape, it'll start to come right off. I don't know if you can see that. All right. And that's just a little piece of silver skin that, you know, I'm not going to say it's going to be tough, but without it on there, you'll get a better mouthfeel, a more tender meat, and the seasoning will kind of get in there a little bit better too, because it's not going on the outside of that silver skin. All right. All right, so now we're going to talk about the rub that goes on this. There's all sorts of different rubs out there. People talk about the wet sauce versus the dry rub. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put together a basic dry rub that I like to use, and it is actually our Union barbecued rib recipe that we use on our Run Ribs and Reggae event every year. And so we're going to start with what I've got here. I've got brown sugar, smoked paprika. So it's worth it to find the smoked paprika. Paprika is great on its own, but the smoked paprika has just a really nice smoky, earthy flavor, and it'll definitely make a difference overall in the flavor of your rub. And if you don't have a smoker at home, the smoked paprika helps. It really does in the flavor profile. So there's all different ways you could do this. It's all about the temperature. But I'm just going to throw together the rub first, and then we'll talk about preparing the ribs. So we're going to start with brown sugar. It's probably the most prevalent ingredient in the mix. So I've got about a half a cup brown sugar there, 2 tablespoons of salt, a kosher salt, tablespoon of black pepper, tablespoon of onion powder. Granulated onion works as well. A tablespoon of garlic, granulated. And dried mustard, a big ingredient in barbecue. When we talk about mustard, we talk about some of these like North Carolina barbecue sauces. So I'm gonna make a couple barbecue sauces, but there's so many different kinds. There's the dark ones that are sweet and they cook on the stove for hours. Then there's your vinegar based. So I'm gonna add the paprika into this dry rub right here. And I'm just gonna mix it up. One of these little spoons here. And I encourage you to experiment and come up with your own rub. You know, when you're putting this together, taste it. So if you're somebody that likes it really sweet, you could add more brown sugar. If you're somebody that likes it more savory, you can omit some of the brown sugar. If you're gonna do like maybe a sweet barbecue sauce, like a honey-based barbecue sauce, maybe do a little less in the rub, less brown sugar. If you like it spicy, there's spices out there like cayenne pepper. You can add more garlic, more black pepper. There's all sorts of cool seasonings these days, chipotle seasonings, things like that. So it's really your preference. And I encourage you, when you make this rub and your sauces and everything you do in cooking, taste your food. Now, this rub might seem a little sweet, might seem a little salty. You have to remember it's going on the ribs, and then the ribs are going to cook for a long period of time. We'll talk about that as I'm rubbing the ribs.
Patrick, we have one question about how much dry mustard and smoked paprika for the rub. So there was a tablespoon of each in there. The main ingredient is definitely the brown sugar and the salt. All the other ingredients are around the same amount. And there's ingredient, the Union baby back ribs ingredients recipe should be shared. I believe it has the amounts right on there. And again, taste it, play around with it. If you like to use a little cumin to have a southwestern flair, or a little chili powder, believe it or not, you could use a little cinnamon in there, a little clove. It really, I encourage you to experiment on your rubs, and they're not necessarily just for ribs. You could use them on chickens, steak, anything, lamb chops, and I encourage you to mess around with the rubs, taste them, and then you can have your own signature rub, which is a conversation piece when people come over to your house and for a barbecue. All right, so we got this rack. We're gonna rub it. So you do it pretty generously, and I like to do this the day before. You know, back in the day when when you do bacon, when you see pork belly, they're curing it. It's a method of preserving it. And in that cure is usually a lot of salt, brown sugar, and spices, very similar to this. So what I like to do is get it right in there. Use your hands. If you don't feel comfortable using your hands, you can use a spoon like I'm doing. I like to get my hands right in there. I like to get dirty. But you can see there's kind of a good solid layer on there, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to flip that right over, and we're going to do the other side. A little shout out to my executive catering chef, Pat Keneally. I wish he was here with me because I'd say he's one of the best barbecue guys that I've ever met. And Pat has, just like other barbecue guys, lots of signature recipes. One of his favorite ingredients is smoked paprika. I always kind of joke around with him about if he ever opens a restaurant, the name should be smoked paprika. But so we'll talk about that a little bit. We'll talk about smoked paprika. What a great ingredient. I mean, if you can't find smoked paprika in your grocery store, go online, order it online. They'll definitely have some great smoked paprika online. So, my talking about our catering chef, Pat Keneally, kind of brings me to one of our cooking methods. So, that right now, that's rubbed. I would normally set that overnight and let that kind of get into that meat, marinate it, cure it a bit. The next day, that paprika will come out and it'll be
the brown sugar and the salt will have kind of dissolved into the meat, and it just kind of marinates and permeates that meat so that you get a good solid flavor. So from here, what we do here, we've done many different events. So if you're at home and you're thinking, you know, how am I going to cook this thing? There's a couple different ways. The main, most important thing, I believe, is that the temperature of either your smoker, your grill, or your oven, all right? It should be 200, 225 degrees, maybe 250 at the max. Reason why is because you want to go low and slow, and you want to cook it for a long period of time. The long period of time is similar to braising. So I've seen people cook ribs in water. I've seen them boil or braise the ribs prior to rubbing them or grilling them or putting barbecue sauce on them. The main thing is that you cook it for roughly 2.5 to 3 hours. So, you know, this particular one, I'd get my smoker going or my grill. If you've got a regular grill at home, and say it's a Weber grill or just your normal, I have a Weber, and the temperature control on it is excellent. So what I like to do is I like to get it to the point where I have the whole thing completely on low so that your flames aren't too high. And then I look at that little temperature gauge that sits right on your grill. And believe it or not, the Weber that I have will go, you could get it right to 225 right on the money. And that's where, if you don't have a smoker, you could just take a little pan, if you will, put it right on your grill with some wood chips in it. And the wood chips will create some smoke. And you can kind of make your own little smoker at home. When you buy a smoker, it's the same exact method. The smokers that they sell these days, you know, it might have a little tray with an element underneath it to heat it, and then you just put the wood chips in there and it smokes. You want to make sure you control your temperature on your grill. If you've got a little, you know, one of these little things where you can let air in or not, use it. If you don't have a temperature gauge on the outside, I would invest in one. The temperature is so important. Being the ribs have a good fat content, they could, you know, if the temperature's too high and they kind of start to drip, it could flame up, you could open up, and disaster. So it's really important that you kind of keep an eye on it and you go low and slow. 225 degrees, maybe 250, an hour and a half to 2.5, 3 hours. And so you can also do the same thing right in your oven. No wood chips in your oven. We don't want to set off your smoke alarm. So in the oven, there's a few ways that I've done it. You could put them in just like this, uncovered, as long as you stay at a nice low temperature. You can also put a little pan of water in the bottom of your oven just to kind of have some moisture. Or you could put them in a pan and cover them with a small amount of water in the bottom, which is braising technique that we've kind of went through here before. These we're going to do right in the oven. At home, you're going to do them in your oven. What I like to do, I like to cook them ahead. So I like to cook them the 2.5 hours, and I'll kind of show you what they're going to look like. Once I pull them out of the oven, and the way I test, so this is a rack of ribs. You can see the size difference. You know, there's a before cooking and after cooking going on. So a good way to tell after that 2.5 hours in the oven. See that the bones just kind of starting to peek out right there? That means that meat is shrinking down and then it's starting to get tender. So this is like, I'd say 2.5 hours. And what I like to do at that point, and if you don't have the convenience to do this, you could just cut them while they're hot on a board. But I like to cook them, you know, for that long, slow period of time at 225 degrees, 250 degrees, until they're tender. And then I like to cool them. The reason why is because I like to cut them ahead of time. You know, I think, you know, you go to some places and, you know, you'll get that half a rack of ribs on a plate. We've all seen it. And it can be kind of difficult to eat at that point. So at this point in time, if I was going to leave this whole, or if I was going to leave it half, I would brush it with my barbecue sauce. And I'm going to make a batch barbecue sauce. I'll show you. And pop them back in the oven to reheat them with the barbecue sauce. Or you can even do them on the grill. So these ribs, like I said, are cooked. So you can see they're slicing really nice. You know, so if you really want them falling apart, you can go longer. But I personally like a little firmness to the bite, and I like it so that I can pick that rib up and kind of eat it, you know, and have it not completely fall off the bone. If you're going to put it on a sandwich or something like that, you can actually cook it to the point where you can pull the bones right out. Nice and easy. So at this point in time, you see the ribs nice and big and meaty. Like again, I would throw these on the grill and reheat them this way. They're fully cooked. And it's nice because you could put out an array of different barbecue. And if somebody just wanted 2 or 3 ribs, they could have 2 or 3 ribs, come back for more, instead of a full rack that they might kind of wrestle with, if you will, on the plate. So we got this rack of ribs we're going to put in the oven or in our smoker or our grill. And in the meantime, my briefcase. All right. In the meantime, let's talk about some sides, some different sauces, some different rubs. So let's start with our just traditional. This is a kind of a Kansas City style barbecue sauce. And what we're going to do is we're going to start with ketchup. Again, all different kinds of barbecue sauce. You can use a tomato product and cook it down. Some people cook their barbecue sauce down. Typically, when I use ketchup, it's already cooked down with that nice flavorings. So I might not cook this barbecue sauce, but you can use tomato sauce, just tomatoes, pureed, and add in all your ingredients. I'm going to start with ketchup. And then I've got, this is a little bit of the rub that we talked about. All right, this has got your granulated onion, your smoked paprika. It's got your salt, your brown sugar. Okay, we're going to put that right in there. About 3 tablespoons. There's about a cup of ketchup. And this is where, you know, some of these different barbecue sauces come into play. So if you were doing a North Carolina barbecue sauce, no ketchup. You would use a mustard base. You see a lot of these golden barbecue sauces, like a North Carolina golden barbecue sauce. They're mustard based, and they're very, very good. Tangy, a little tangier than these. So I'm adding about 2 tablespoons of honey right here. I typically tend to go for the honey flavor because I like the natural flavor of honey, but you can also use brown sugar. And again, preference. If you want it spicy, you could add cayenne, you could add sriracha. You want it a little bit more vinegary, you could add more vinegar. I like cider vinegar because I think it lends really well to barbecue. So I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of cider. And what, you know, again, I can't stress enough to taste it. Once you mix it up, taste it. You could add a little bit, take a little bit away, and you know, have your signature barbecue sauce. So right here, I've got molasses. Molasses gives it a nice, almost umami. It's Kansas City, baby. Molasses is definitely a Kansas City thing. It tends to balance out the sweetness a little bit with the bitterness, because molasses can be a little bit bitter. So we put 2 tablespoons of that in there. And then I've got Worcestershire sauce. Love Worcestershire. Put a tablespoon of Worcestershire in there.
Can you spell it?
Can you spell it? Worcester. All right, so I'm just going to whip that together. So a few things when you're doing this. Again, see that nice color that you're looking for? That comes from the molasses. That comes from the Worcestershire. It comes from the smoked paprika. And Smell it. And I can't stress enough. Taste it. That's damn good. So when you're doing this, it's your preference how thick you'd like it. You could add tomato paste if you like it a little bit thicker and heartier. If you like it a little sweeter, more honey, more brown sugar. If you like it spicy, again, sriracha. There's a ton of hot sauces out there. If you want a little southwestern flair, cumin, garlic, and lime juice added right to this, and maybe a little chipotle. That's a very popular sauce. So that's our basic barbecue sauce right there, Memphis style, right? What we're gonna do, now we're gonna go off the beaten path a little bit, right? So you see a lot of Asian style pork ribs out there, and you know, they're really, really nice, and they really lend well to different. So instead of your cornbread and your sweet potatoes or your corn on the cob and your coleslaw, you know, you could serve kimchi, you could serve bok choy or jasmine rice, things like that. But real quick, I'm just going to throw together an Asian barbecue sauce. So this is that hoisin sauce that we talked about when we did stir fries. Hoisin sauce, really, really good. It's a you know, it's a soy paste. It's got star anise and different flavors in there, and it's a nice thick base. So it's a nice. So it tends to be a tad bit salty. So what I like to do is I like to add fresh ginger. Fresh ginger is just phenomenal. So this is 2 teaspoons of fresh ginger right here. 2 teaspoons of fresh ginger and your hoisin sauce, right? So I've also got a little sesame oil. That sesame oil adds a really nice flavor, a little depth. You got a tablespoon sesame oil, right? And then I've got a little vinegar. The vinegar balances out the sweet and saltiness of the hoisin sauce. You can use rice vinegar if you'd like. I'm using cider vinegar today. Rice vinegar is technically tends to be a little bit more sweet and a little less acidic. But I'm going to go ahead and add a tablespoon and a half, roughly, to this. Again, you notice I added a little bit. I didn't add the whole thing in there. It's because you can taste it and use your preference. So, last but not least, I like to garnish it with little black and white sesame seeds. I think it adds a little crunch to the sauce, and it makes really, really well for presentation. This sauce, again, can use for anything. Grilled chicken, grilled fish, stir fries, things like that. So we've got our traditional barbecue sauce, Memphis style, and then we got an Asian barbecue sauce. So real quick, I'm just going to throw together some coleslaw. A typical, really good dish that goes with barbecue that is very easy to make, and you can do it with what's in your kitchen. So right now, I'm going to make coleslaw dressing. It's the most simple thing, and pretty much you usually have in your pantry what you need to make coleslaw dressing. You can use onion if you'd like. I typically don't. So a little bit of mayonnaise. I think I got around half a cup of mayonnaise there. Okay, and I'm going to add 2 teaspoons of vinegar, cider vinegar. You can use white vinegar, and I'm going to equal that right out with sugar. You can add the sugar into the vinegar first if you'd like, and then this is really the key, celery salt. I've got a teaspoon. I'm adding it all. I like it a little salty. And I'm going to mix that up, and I want it to, you know, have a coleslaw consistency, a creamy dressing consistency. You can kind of see that in there. And what's real important again, the flavor. Is it sweet enough? Is it tangy enough, right? The celery salt makes that. So what I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna dress my coleslaw with it. Okay? The thing about coleslaw, you can overdress it pretty easily. I tend to like to make it a couple hours before the event, and I like to go really light on the dressing because after about 10 minutes, your coleslaw, your cabbage will start to pick up those flavors. And the salt, you know, will start to pull the moisture out of your cabbage a little bit. Okay, so there we have it. We've got our coleslaw, we've got our ribs. I wish I had a grill right here in front of me where I could grill them up, set up a plate. You know, typical things to do with barbecue. You could do your cornbread, corn on the cob, potato salad. Today we're doing a small run ribs reggae event out here at the kiosk, and we've got potato salad, coleslaw, cornbread, barbecue chicken, barbecued ribs, these type of things. Typical barbecue fare. So that, I mean, that pretty much concludes barbecue ribs. You know, again, it's all about the temperature. It's all about low and slow, and that's the secret to that fall off the bone barbecue rib. Okay, so you know, please let us know if you'd like to see some stuff in the future, or if you give us your feedback. If you you know, you make the ribs at home and you've got questions, anything like that, you can always email me, longtonp@union.edu. Executive chef for Union College, American Dining Creations, and that's pretty much our barbecue rib demonstration for today. Do we have any questions or anything?
Larry says, thanks, some good ideas to try.
Thank you very much. I can't wait to try them. I wish we were there.
You're very welcome, and have a great weekend, and enjoy your barbecue ribs.
Certainly will.
Thank you.
Bye.